food prices are going up. Here are my top tips for beating inflation at the grocery store. Tip number one is to stock up on your staples right now, as much as you can stock up. Something that's really important to understand is that we talk about inflation going up or inflation going down, but that's all relative. When inflation goes down, it doesn't mean that you're actually spending less money on your groceries. It just means that the inflation isn't going up as fast as it did maybe the year before. That means your food is always getting more expensive. So as long as you have staples that will last on your shelf, you're gonna pay less for them right now than you are later in general. So make sure whenever you can, stock up on staples. Whenever you have any extra money, anything in the savings account, put that to stocking up on your basics, because that's gonna end up paying off in the long run as you save money from purchasing it later. Things like beans, grains, whole grains, some of your baking basics, those will last for a really, really long time, and you can keep them on your shelf. Canned goods, so go ahead and buy as much as you can now and then seek to just keep them topped off. That way, if things get too expensive at some point, you already have a supply on your shelf and you've saved money on it. Tip number two is to shop with a list. A list that started from a meal plan that started by walking around your house and seeing what you already have on hand. Sometimes we forget that we have things on hand, and sometimes in bulk, and we need to focus on using those things up and taking those things into consideration, get them into the rotation. So first, go to your freezers, go to your pantry shelves, go to wherever you keep your food and see what you have on hand. Then create your meal plan around that. Now, don't forget to actually plan in your snacks if you're a snacker. That way you don't have an excuse to just pick up random items at the grocery store. Then create your shopping list based on that. Now, if you really want to get good at this, go ahead and grab that sales flyer and start indexing that into the mix, and you will have a shopping list that keeps you on track from buying extra things and that is based on what you're actually going to be eating that week. Right along with that comes tip number three, which is to keep less food in your refrigerator. Now, I know if you followed me for a while, you know that I'm always saying store more food, store more food. But perishable food in your refrigerator is actually a different thing. The fewer items you have in the refrigerator, the more it's gonna force you to stay on track with your meal plan, and the more you're just gonna have to kind of stick with the program instead of start grabbing things out of the refrigerator, and then maybe you forget what's in there because there's so much in there, you end up with leftovers. You really need to start storing less in the refrigerator, and you're gonna be able to find everything so easily, you'll know exactly what you need to eat. Tip number four is to pay attention to the unit prices. Now, we've all been told over and over again to buy the bigger bag to save on dollars and cents at the grocery store. But the last few years, things have started to change, and sometimes the smaller packages actually have a lower unit price than the larger packages. So make sure you're always comparing the unit prices in order to save the most money. Smaller is not always more expensive. Sometimes it can be a great deal. Tip number five is a really, really important one, and that is to make better use of what you do have. In our culture, we've gotten really used to and comfortable with food waste. Don't let anything go to waste. It used to be that people would keep a scrap pot for scrap bits of fat in a cold place. And this is where any meat that would come into the house, they'd trim off that fat and they'd put it into that scrap pot, the trimmings pot. And that was used to render down and turn into their source of household fat. You can do so many amazing things with your extras and the things that we're used to throwing away. Make bone broth. Make sure you're saving all of your little bits of scraps that come from chopping up vegetables or even leftover vegetables. Put it into a broth along with any bones that were in the meat that you ate. Remember, you can stash these things in the freezer until you have time to make the broth or until you have enough items to make it. Don't forget, you can use little hard ends of cheeses and other things that are maybe not perfectly edible. Another thing we like to do in our house is have what's called a survival soup. This is when you get all those little bits of extra leftovers that don't seem to go together and to make a meal. You'd be surprised if you throw it in there with some really good quality bone broth and cook it up, how you can make a delicious soup out of all sorts of little bits and ends left over in your refrigerator. Make sure when you're doing your meal planning that you always plan in one time during the week where you can use up all the little bits of leftovers, even if it means that everybody's having a different dinner around the table, or there's a couple things to pick from. Make sure you're using the best use of those, because we really don't want to spend any extra money on food than we have to in order to feed our family, and we certainly don't want any food waste. Another tip that goes along with this is to simplify your diet and to stop buying so much variety of food. Now, I know we all like to eat all different types of food, but oftentimes it's those little bits of condiments that you need for each different type of food, maybe the fish sauce and the oyster sauce and the special hot sauce and all of those different things that add up to being the expensive things in the grocery store. Simplifying your diet means you can have fewer of those things on hand and just have some really basic ingredients that can make some incredibly wonderful meals. If you focus on the quality of your vegetables and your proteins, the flavor is going to be so good that you're not going to need a lot of extra sauces and other things in order to increase its flavor. My next tip: just skip the grocery store altogether and go straight to buying your food from bulk sources straight from the farmer when possible, or from bulk co-ops. Check out some of the bulk co-ops like Azure Standard, where you can get bulk orders of large amounts of food at really good unit prices. Also, stop buying your meats from the grocery store. Go straight to the producer and order a quarter or a half of an animal in order to be able to save huge amounts of money and get amazing prices on your meat. This not only supports your local agriculture, which is so important, but it also gets you a really, really good supply of meat that is inflation-proof as soon as it hits your freezer. The same thing is true with your vegetables and your fruits. Go straight to the farmer and see if you can work out a deal with them. Meeting your farmer at the local farmer's market is a great way to go. Ask them about bulk deals. You can save a lot of money. And right along with that, the ultimate way to beat inflation at the grocery store is to grow your own food. If you're not growing a garden, get it in the works for this year. Prices are expected to continue to go up on food and go up pretty steeply. Some items as much as 50%. That is a lot of increase in money. So offset that by growing what you can in your own yard or getting to know somebody else who does. Make sure you make some plans to preserve it so you can keep it on the shelf. A packet of seeds only costs a few dollars and it can grow hundreds of pounds of produce. So make sure you take advantage of that ultimate way of saving money and beating inflation this year. Especially if you save your own seeds, then next year your seeds are even free. Hey, if you want to learn more about bulk buying and properly storing your bulk bought foods so that they last for the longest period of time, check out this video right here where I take you through the entire process.